The space station floated quietly near the edge of the Lyric's expanse. Far from Earth, far from any safe zone, it was called Haven Point. But today, there was nothing peaceful about it. Inside the shining silver halls of the summit chamber, voices were sharp, laughter was cruel, and the air smelled like power and pride. Representatives from the Crag Dominion sat with their arms crossed, their wide jaws twitching with amusement. Next to them were the Volari, tall and glowing slightly blue, under the artificial lights. Then came the Drellan hive creatures with glassy black eyes and twisted limbs. They all watched the humans as if they were insects who wandered into a battlefield without knowing it. Ambassador Claire Wren sat at the far end of the long oval table, wearing a calm face, but her fingers tightened under the table. Her jaw tensed every time they laughed. She was young but not inexperienced. She had seen war, she had survived it, and now she was here, hoping to avoid another. Beside her stood Commander Jack Halden. His face carried the lines of battles he never spoke about. A scar ran from his cheek to his neck, and one of his hands was cybernetic silent proof of the last time he faced the Crag. He didn't like meetings, he didn't believe in words anymore, but he came to stand beside Claire, because she asked him to. "We appreciate your presence today," Claire said calmly. "We are here to discuss peace, so we don't repeat the bloodshed of last year's border war." The Crag speaker leaned forward, smiling with teeth far too sharp. "Peace?" he said. "Humans don't offer peace, they beg for it." The Volari diplomat chuckled. "Yes, and they come with nothing but words, no fleets, no power, just their soft tongues." The room erupted in quiet laughter, low and cruel. Some of the alien aides exchanged amused glances. One Drellan even clapped its clawed hands together slowly. Mockingly, the sound echoed in the silent pause that followed. Jack's cybernetic hand flexed slightly, but he said nothing. Claire breathed slowly. "We are not here to be mocked," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "We are offering peace because it is the smarter path." The Crag representative tilted his head, then stood. He walked slowly toward the wide window that looked out into space. Stars glowed cold beyond the glass, and alien ships floated like sharks circling prey. Dozens of ships, all alien, none human. "You offer peace," the Crag said, not turning around. "But you have no fleet. You have no power behind your words. What you offer is weakness. And weakness in this galaxy is death." Then he turned to face Claire and smiled again. "Your peace is as weak as your ships." For a moment, the room was silent. Claire said nothing. Jack said nothing. Even the translator drones went still. The message was clear, the insult deep, and none of the aliens thought there would be any reply. They had already turned their attention away. Claire slowly stood, gathering her datapad. "We will leave you to your jokes," she said. "We've heard enough." Jack nodded once and followed her as she walked out of the chamber, the heavy doors sliding shut behind them. The moment they were in the hallway, Claire touched the control pad on her wrist. One short pulse. A signal. No one noticed. No one even cared. "They think they've won," Claire said softly. "They always laugh before the sky changes." Jack replied, eyes scanning the stars outside the station's long viewing hallway. Behind them, the aliens continued their laughter, completely unaware of what had just been set into motion. Claire stood still for a moment, looking out the window herself, her voice calm but low. "When it arrives, they'll know," Jack nodded. "They'll hear it before they see it." The camera drones on the ceiling recorded everything, but none of it made sense yet. Outside the window, space was quiet, as it always was before thunder came, and far beyond. Something ancient and deadly was already moving, silent, fast, and coming closer. It didn't have flags or colors, it didn't ask permission, it had no interest in talking. It existed for only one reason: to end the laughter before it began again, and this time, it flew under a human flag. Claire walked slowly down the hallway of the space station, her heels tapping gently on the smooth floor. The walls around her were clean and silent, but her heart was heavy. she didn't show it on her face. She looked calm, collected, like nothing had happened back in the meeting room. But inside something burned. Commander Jack Halden walked beside her, tall, silent, always alert. He didn't speak. But Claire didn't need words from him. Just his presence meant everything. He had been with her through too many dark moments. Too many times where the universe had tried to silence humanity's voice. They entered the private diplomatic quarters, just a small silver room with a wide view of the stars outside. Claire sat down and opened her wrist console. Her fingers moved quickly, typing a short sequence. It was a code, a signal that had been waiting to be used for years. She sent it without hesitation. Jack stood by the window, staring at the stars. His eyes moved slowly, watching the alien warships float outside the station. There were so many Krag destroyers, Volari carriers, Drellin swarms. It looked like a wall of power surrounding them. No human ship was near, not one. "They really think we came here alone," he said without turning. Claire looked up. "They don't believe we're serious. They think we're desperate." Jack gave a small nod. They laughed, and now they'll listen. Far above the station, the alien fleets were shifting into formation. Their ships moved like soldiers in a parade, blocking the space lanes, closing off exits. They weren't just mocking humans anymore. They were preparing to trap them, to make sure Earth never dared to speak again. Inside one of the Krag command ships, a general barked orders. "Keep the human ship docked. Jam all transmissions. Prepare to board if needed." He grinned with rows of sharp teeth. "This ends today." But deep in space, beyond their sensors, beyond their imagination, something ancient and terrible moved. No one saw it yet, not even the advanced scanners of the Volari fleet. They were too busy watching the humans, too proud, too confident. Their eyes were pointed in the wrong direction. And the silence of space hid the truth well. Jack leaned against the window, his cybernetic hand tapping the glass lightly. He didn't smile, but something flickered in his eyes. A memory, a whisper of what was coming. Claire stood and joined him. Both of them watched the stars in silence for a long time. Then Jack said quietly, "When it gets here, everything changes." Claire nodded. And not just for them. Down in the hangar bays, the human crew members were calm, too calm. They moved like shadows, quietly preparing emergency protocols, transferring files, checking backup systems. One of the younger officers, Lieutenant Sam Rogers, looked nervous. He whispered to the engineer beside him, "Are we really doing this?" The engineer, an older woman named Nina Clark, gave a small smile. "We're not doing anything," she said. "We're just waiting." Above them, the stars shimmered normally. No signs of movement, no warnings, but the signal had been sent. And somewhere, in the darkness of space, the response had already begun. The air on the station grew tighter, more tense. The alien guards outside the human quarters moved closer, their weapons ready. They expected resistance, panic, maybe fear. Instead, they got silence. Claire sat down again and opened her datapad. Reviewing the peace proposal once more, she highlighted the lines that spoke of unity, understanding, and mutual safety. Then she deleted them. Jack remained near the window, motionless, his eyes locked on a single point in the stars. Then he spoke, soft and certain. "They'll hear it before they see it." Back in the summit chamber, the aliens laughed once more. They passed drinks around, toasted to the end of human arrogance. The Krag speaker raised his voice and said, "By tomorrow, the humans will be begging us for mercy." And yet, no one noticed the subtle shift in the stars, the quiet ripple, the faint distortion spreading across the black. Something was coming, not with noise, not with fire, but with silence so deep it made stars flicker. A warship, not like any the galaxy had ever seen. No name, no call sign, no warning. It would arrive not as a savior, not as a hero, but as a shadow across the sky, cold, unfeeling, final. And it would speak not in words, but in what followed after the silence. Out in deep space, far beyond the lyric's expanse, something stirred in the darkness. There was no warning, No bright flash, no sound, just a strange ripple, like space itself was breathing. The stars bent for a second, like light was pulled and stretched, and then it appeared. The warship slid out of hyperspace without a sound, as if it had always been there. Hiding in plain sight, its black surface swallowed starlight, shaped like a long blade, smooth and sharp. It looked more like a shadow than a machine, a living thing forged from nightmares. Its name wasn't written on the hull. There were no flags, no symbols, just darkness. This ship had no need for introductions. It was known by its silence, feared by its absence. And when it arrived, everything changed. The ship was called Equinox, but only humans knew that name. To the rest of the galaxy, it would soon be remembered as the ship that didn't speak, only acted inside the alien fleets above the space station. Sensors began to scream, alerts flashed, captains shouted, and eyes turned toward the disturbance. Ships rushed to change position. Shields went up, weapons charged, but it was too late. The Equinox just hovered, unmoving, a silent shape in the sea of stars. Yet its presence felt like thunder on the bridge of a crag battleship. The officer shouted, "What is that? Where did it come from?" No one answered. Their scanners couldn't explain it. The ship didn't appear on the usual radar. It had no heat signature, no engine trails, and no transmissions. It was as if the universe had bent and let it through, unseen, untouched, in. The summit station. Jack Halden watched from the window. His lips curled into a slow, cold smile. "Right on time," he whispered. Claire stood beside him, her voice quiet. "They still don't understand." Back on the Equinox, the bridge was silent. The crew moved with quiet precision. No one shouted, no one panicked. They had done this before, many times. Captain Nate Ryder sat in his command chair, his eyes locked on the alien fleet ahead, his voice calm but heavy with purpose. "Power to main guns," he said. "Main guns online," replied Lieutenant Maya Lewis, her fingers dancing across the console. "Cloak status?" he asked. "Cloak fully dropped. We're visible to all ships." "Good," Nate nodded. "Let them see what silence looks like." Outside, the Equinox moved, not fast, just steady, slow, confident. It wasn't rushing into battle. It was walking forward, like it had all the time in the universe, like it had done this before and would do it again. One Volari ship panicked and fired a warning shot. The beam hit the side of the Equinox and disappeared. No damage, no reaction, just silence. Then, the Equinox turned slightly, facing the fleet like a wolf noticing prey. Captain Nate gave the order. "Send the message." Message sent, Maya said. On every alien screen, a single human sentence appeared. No voice, no threat, just words. "This is our answer to your laughter." Panic spread fast across the enemy ships. Commands overlapped. Captains barked orders. One crag ship tried to move out of formation. Another blocked it. Confusion turned to fear. The Equinox did not fire yet. It didn't have to. Its design alone was terrifying. No exposed engines, no weak points. It looked like it was built not to fly, but to destroy, made from a mix of alien tech and human rage. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a warning. Inside the summit station, one of the alien guards turned to Claire and asked in a low voice, What ship is that?" She didn't look at him. She only said, "The reason we offered peace." Jack's eyes narrowed as he watched the Equinox drift closer. Its guns still silent, but every second felt like a countdown. He knew what would come. Next, he had seen the ship in training, seen what it could do in tests, and even then, it scared him. The Volari diplomat in the summit room received a message and turned pale. He stood, shaking slightly. We need to reconsider the peace talks," he muttered. The crag speaker growled. "Coward, it's just one ship." Claire turned, her voice sharp. "One is all we need." Back in space, the Equinox reached the center of the enemy fleet. Still no attack, still no sound. And then its forward guns began to glow, not red, not orange, but deep blue, something not seen in this galaxy before. It was the color of human technology born from desperation. The color of power built not to conquer, but to stop the next war before it started, and the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to push Earth too far. The alien ships watched the human warship in silence. The Equinox floated alone in the middle of their fleet, calm and still, like a giant shadow that had no fear, its forward weapons glowing softly in that strange, deep blue color. A color the galaxy had never seen in war before. On the bridge of the Equinox, Captain Nate Ryder gave the order without raising his voice. "Fire," he said. The ship responded instantly. There was no countdown, no warning, no signal, just action. A beam of pure energy blasted out from the main cannon, slicing through space like a sword. It hit a Krag battleship in the center of its hull. And the ship didn't explode, it disappeared, as if the atoms were pulled apart and scattered into the stars. The alien fleets froze in shock for a full second. No one moved. They had never seen a weapon like that before. It didn't leave fire or debris, just emptiness. A silent hole in the place where a powerful warship had been just a moment ago. Panic hit the alien crews like a storm. Some started shouting, others tried to move their ships. Shields went up, weapons locked on, but their reaction was too slow. The Equinox fired again, this time at a Volari carrier. The huge ship began to twist, metal folding inward as if crushed by invisible hands. And then it was gone too. What kind of weapon is that? One alien commander screamed. "They're using something forbidden. This breaks every code of war," yelled another, but the Equinox didn't care about codes or rules. It had been built for one reason: to protect humanity, not with talk, not with promises, but with unstoppable force. Back on the summit station, the alien delegates stood in horror. Their proud smiles were gone. Now their eyes were wide with fear. Claire and Jack stood near the window, watching the scene unfold. Jack didn't speak, he just stared, his hands behind his back, calm, patient, like he was waiting for something he already knew would happen. Claire's voice was quiet but clear. "This is why we asked for peace." Krag's speaker turned to her, his voice trembling now. "This is murder. This is a massacre." Claire looked at him coldly. "No, this is a warning." Out in space, the alien ships began to fire back. Energy beams lit up the sky, missiles launched. Plasma cannons fired in every direction, all aimed at the Equinox. It should have been overwhelmed, destroyed, turned to dust in seconds, but it didn't even flinch. Every weapon that touched the Equinox was absorbed, blocked, or simply ignored. Their most advanced missiles exploded far from its hull, redirected by invisible defenses. Their energy beams flickered and vanished before reaching its surface. Inside the Equinox, Lieutenant Maya Lewis called out calmly, "Enemy fleets firing. Damage report." "0. Continue forward," Captain Nate said. "Fire at will." The Equinox moved again, slowly drifting through the enemy formation, firing as it went. One ship after another vanished in silence. No explosions, no wreckage, just empty space left behind. Alien commanders shouted for retreat. Some tried to flee, but the Equinox was faster than they expected. It cut off escape routes, cornered ships, then erased them. No human voice came through the communication lines. No threats, no speeches. Just the terrible silence of a warship that didn't need to explain itself. The Drellin swarm ships, known for their speed and numbers, tried to rush the Equinox, dozens of them charging at once, hoping to overwhelm it. But a wave of blue light pulsed from the human ship, and every Drellin craft stopped mid-flight, systems dead, engines cold. They floated lifelessly, like toys in space. On the summit station, a young alien aide collapsed to his knees, whispering, "What are they? How did they build something like this?" Jack Halden finally turned to the room of stunned diplomats. "You said we were weak," he said. "You called our peace talks pathetic. You surrounded us, threatened us, laughed at us." He pointed to the sky. "And now you see what we built in silence." The Volari diplomat could barely speak. This ship. It's not normal. It's not allowed." Claire responded without emotion. We didn't build it to follow rules. We built it so we wouldn't have to beg ever again. Above them, the battle was almost over. The equinox had turned the galaxy's strongest fleets into scattered pieces of dust and fear. It didn't roar, it didn't shine, it just moved forward like death itself. Slow and unstoppable, for the first time in years. The galaxy understood something new. Humans didn't need 100 ships, they just needed one ship that could. Remind everyone that peace was offered not from weakness, but from strength held back, and now, that strength had been unleashed. Inside the warship Equinox, everything was calm. There was no shouting, no fear, only quiet control. The crew worked like a single mind, trained, focused, ready for whatever came next. The outside galaxy was panicking, but inside the ship, it felt like the eye of a storm. In the core control room, Lieutenant Maya Lewis watched her screen closely. Her eyes were sharp, and her hands never stopped moving across the panel. She had trained for this moment for years, but even now, seeing the alien fleets fall so fast made her heart beat a little faster. She turned to the man standing beside her. They weren't ready for this, she said quietly. Engineer Brad Connors stood with his arms crossed, wearing a simple gray uniform. His face was calm, but there was sadness in his eyes. We were never supposed to use it like this, he replied. Not like this. The room around them hummed with quiet energy. Cables glowed with blue light, and strange symbols pulsed gently on the walls. This was the core of the ship, the heart of the Equinox, and it wasn't just built with human technology. The most powerful part of the ship came from something else. Something old and dangerous. Something salvaged from a war long ago, years before. Humanity had fought a race called the Threx, a terrifying enemy no one else dared to face. That war had ended with fire and blood, but from their defeat, humanity had taken something, a power source unlike anything known. It was that power, mixed with human design and human anger, that gave birth to the Equinox. Brad looked at the glowing core in front of him. Its light pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. This thing is alive, he whispered. Maybe not like us, but it's alive in some way. Maya nodded. And it remembers. Back on the bridge, Captain Nate Ryder watched as the alien fleet scattered across space. Some ships ran, others tried to hide, a few kept fighting, but none of them stood a chance. How many left? Nate asked without emotion. Less than 10 still active, sir, came the reply. None are attacking. Good, Nate said. Hold fire, let them see us. Let them feel what it means to face silence. The bridge went quiet again, only the sound of soft beeping and sensor updates. Nate sat in his chair, thinking about the years it took to get here, about the warnings ignored, the diplomats laughed at, the peace talks broken before they began. He remembered Earth's skies turning red during the last invasion. Children running through smoke, soldiers dying in trenches of alien soil. He remembered how humanity begged for peace, and no one listened. That's why this ship was built. Not for revenge, but to make sure no one ever ignored humanity again. In the engine bay, Brad checked the temperature levels. The core was stable, but he could feel something more like the ship itself was watching, waiting, hungry for action. He didn't trust it completely, but he respected it, and he feared it. Just enough to treat it like a living thing. We never gave it a voice, Maya said as she walked over to him. Do you think it wants one? Brad thought for a second, then shook his head. No, silence is louder. Back on the summit station, the alien delegates were no longer arguing. They weren't yelling or making demands. They sat in silence, watching the giant black ship move slowly across the sky like a ghost. Some whispered among themselves. Others simply stared with wide, empty eyes. The crag speaker, once so full of pride, now looked like a broken man. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Claire stood in front of them, holding a datapad in her hand, but she didn't need it anymore. No speech was needed now. Everything that needed to be said was already written across the stars. Jack Halden stepped forward and said quietly, This was never our first option. We offered peace first. Remember that. We gave you the choice to avoid this. The room stayed silent. No one replied. Even the air felt heavy. Claire turned her eyes to the window, watching the equinox hover above the station like a judgment from the stars. She remembered the first time she saw the blueprints, the long hours in hidden bunkers, the arguments in shadowed rooms, the decision no one wanted to make, but someone had to. She had signed the order, and now the galaxy was watching the result of that decision. The equinox stood not just as a ship, but as a line drawn in the stars, a symbol of a new truth humanity would never beg again. Not for peace, not for survival, not for respect. Those days were over, and as the last alien ships turned and fled into deep space, one message remained on every screen, glowing in blue. Peace was our first language. Silence is our second. The alien fleets were broken. Some of their ships floated without power. Some tried to run, and a few vanished into hyperspace without a word. They had come to the summit station to show their strength, to mock humanity, but now they were running from a single ship, a warship that hadn't even used its full power. The equinox stopped in place, silent and still. Hanging in the black sky above the summit station, it didn't chase, it didn't speak. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough. On board the equinox, Captain Nate Ryder stood from his chair and stepped forward, his eyes looking out. At the view ahead, standby mode, he said. The ship powered down its weapons, but its shields remained up. The lights dimmed slightly, and everything returned to silence. Lieutenant Maya Lewis turned in her seat. "They're gone, sir. No signs of regrouping." Nate nodded. "They won't try again, not today." The bridge stayed quiet, no cheering, no celebration. This wasn't a victory to enjoy. It was a reminder of something painful. Humanity had been forced to become this, because no one listened when they asked for peace. Inside the summit station, the alien leaders began to whisper. Some pulled out communication devices, trying to contact their governments, but the silence of the equinox still hung over them like a shadow. They didn't know if it would fire again. They didn't know if they were safe. The crag speaker finally stood up. His proud armor now felt heavy, useless. His voice was no longer loud. We wish to reopen the peace talks," he said slowly. "Under new terms." Claire turned toward him. She didn't smile. Her face was calm and steady. "You had your chance," she said softly. "You laughed at it." He looked down, ashamed, then whispered, "What do you want now?" Before Claire could answer, Jack Halden stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "We want what we asked for the first time. Respect, understanding, and no more threats." The Volari delegate stepped forward, shaking slightly. "What if others don't listen? What if someone else tries to test you again?" Claire looked out the window at the equinox, still quiet, still waiting. "Then they'll face what you just saw." On the bridge of the equinox, messages began to arrive from across the galaxy. Hundreds of them, from leaders, war councils, intelligence networks, even black market brokers. They all wanted the same thing: information, answers. Fear filled every corner of the stars now. Nate glanced at the messages, then said, "No replies." Let the silence speak for itself. In the summit station, the alien leaders sat down again, but their posture had changed. They no longer looked like conquerors. Now they looked like survivors, their voices softer, their words slower. For the first time, they truly listened. Jack and Claire stood together near the edge of the chamber, alone, but powerful in presence. They didn't shout, they didn't demand, but everyone looked at them now with new eyes. One of the younger alien aides leaned over to the Volari leader and asked, "How did they build that ship?" The Volari didn't answer. He only whispered, "Because they were tired of losing." Meanwhile, inside the equinox, Brad Connors checked the core readings again. Everything was stable, but something in his chest felt heavy, like a weight that wouldn't leave. He sat down in a quiet corner of the engineering deck and rubbed his face with both hands. Maya joined him a few minutes later, sitting beside him. "You okay?" she asked. Brad nodded slowly. Yeah, just thinking. About what? He looked at the glowing lights of the power conduits, then said, "We built this so we wouldn't have to fight anymore. But now the whole galaxy's afraid of us." Maya sighed. "Fear keeps us safe for now." Brad looked at her. "But what if they fear us too much? What if we become the thing they all hate?" Maya didn't have an answer. She just sat quietly beside him, letting the silence speak. Above the summit station, the equinox remained still, but the whole galaxy felt its presence. Some called it a monster, others called it a savior, but one thing was clear. Everyone now knew that peace with humans was no longer a choice. It was a necessity in Earth's command center, far away from the scene. President Leona Gray received the first full report. She read it quietly, line by line, then folded the tablet and set it down. She stared out the window of her office, toward the stars, and said softly to no one, "They laughed. But they won't laugh again." Somewhere deep in human space, other warships were being completed, smaller than the Equinox, but built with the same silence, the same power, not for war, but to make sure no one ever forgot what happened today. And as the sun rose over Earth, the galaxy began to change, not because of words, not because of treaties, but because of one ship that reminded the stars humans only ask nicely once. Back on Earth, there were no fireworks, no celebrations, no loud speeches. The halls of the Global Defense Command were quiet. People walked slowly, speaking in low voices. They had all seen the footage. They had all read the reports. The Equinox had done what no other ship in human history had ever done. It silenced the galaxy. President Leona Gray sat alone in her high office. The stars outside her window looked peaceful, but she knew better. Peace was not given. It was built, forced, and protected, and sometimes it came wearing black steel. She picked up the report again, reading the final lines. "Enemy fleets disabled, survivors fled, no resistance remains." Her fingers closed the file, and she whispered, "We didn't want to be this." Meanwhile, Claire Wren stood in her private quarters on the summit station. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her face looked tired. Her eyes carried a weight too heavy for words. She had been a diplomat all her life. She believed in peace, in negotiation, in unity. But today, she watched it all fail, and she watched the sky do what her words couldn't. Jack Halden knocked lightly and stepped inside. He said nothing at first, just stood near the door, waiting. Claire finally spoke. "Do you think they learned anything?" Jack looked at her, his voice calm. "Yes, they learned what happens when you ignore a quiet voice." She nodded slowly. "But at what cost?" Outside the station, the sky was quiet now. The Equinox hovered still, like a mountain in the stars. Its weapons cold, its engines silent, but everyone could feel its presence, like a storm waiting to return. In the Crag homeworld, the High Council held an emergency meeting. For the first time in decades, they were not planning invasion. They were not laughing, they were afraid. One elder slammed his hand on the table. "How did we let this happen?" He shouted. Another answered, "Because we were too proud to listen." The same panic spread through other empires. The Volari Syndicate called off 3 upcoming military expansions. The Drellin Hive sent scouts deep into unknown space looking for answers everywhere across the galaxy. Governments were changing their plans, not because of diplomacy, but because of fear, and that fear had a shape now. One warship, one name, Equinox on Earth. People watched the footage again and again. Children asked their parents, "Is that our ship?" And the parents replied quietly, "Yes, it's ours." Some felt proud. Some felt scared. Many felt both. In a small classroom in Nevada, a teacher showed her students a still image of the Equinox, floating above the summit station. She didn't explain what the ship had done. She just said, "This is what it means when you are left with no other choice." Claire sat down and began writing her final report. She didn't fill it with emotion or anger. Her words were simple, her message clear. We gave peace first. They mocked it. Now they understand. She paused, looked out the window again, and added one more line. This was not our beginning of war. This was our end of begging. Jack stood nearby, watching the stars, his mind full of memories, battlefields, smoke, fallen friends, failed talks, and now silence. He didn't smile, but he felt something inside, something close to closure. The alien delegates who had once laughed now waited quietly in the station's guest chambers. No longer guests, not quite prisoners, unsure of what would happen next. They had not been attacked directly, but they had been shown a future they never expected. A future where humans were not the weakest species, but the most dangerous. One alien leader whispered to another, "We built fleets to make them kneel, but they built silence to make us listen." No one dared respond. The galaxy had always believed humans were emotional, disorganized, scattered, too soft to survive long in a brutal universe, but they were wrong. They didn't understand what humans were capable of when pushed, when ignored, when broken too many times. The Equinox wasn't just a warship. It was the result of pain, of loss, of promises broken too many times. It was born not in celebration, but in silence, built by hands that no longer believed in hope, but in making sure no one would ever hurt Earth again. And now, that silence echoed across the stars. In the coming weeks, treaties were rewritten, boundaries redrawn, and whispers spread in every corner of space. No one spoke the name Equinox loudly, but everyone remembered it. Every species, every empire, every planet. Peace didn't return right away, but for the first time in years, no one dared threaten Earth, not after what they had seen. Not after the sky roared with that human warship. The war was over before it began. The galaxy had expected long battles. They had expected humans to beg, to plead, to fall to their knees. But what they saw instead was something they couldn't understand. A single ship, silent and cold, that changed everything in one day. The Equinox did not return to Earth. It did not join a parade or land in a hangar. It remained out there, floating between stars, far beyond the summit station, like a shadow watching the galaxy from a distance. It didn't need permission, and it didn't need orders. It had one purpose: to be the quiet reminder of what happens when peace is mocked. Captain Nate Ryder stood alone on the command deck. The stars stretched wide around him, endless and quiet. He didn't speak much these days, not because he had nothing to say, but because silence had become the most powerful weapon they had. Silence meant strength now. Maya Lewis sat at her console, reviewing messages from distant sectors. No threats, no fleet movements. All borders quiet, she said softly. Nate nodded. "They're thinking, or hiding," she replied. "Either way, they're not laughing anymore," Nate said. Inside the ship's core, Brad Connors walked alone, the quiet hum of the energy. Pulse was the only sound. The alien core glowed gently, like a beating heart, but colder, more distant. He placed his hand on the glass, and for a moment, he thought he felt something pulse back. He whispered to himself, "You're still listening, aren't you?" The ship didn't answer, but it didn't need to. The Equinox was not just metal and wires anymore. It was something else, something born from desperation, pain, and hope wrapped in armor. Back on Earth, people went back to their lives, but something had changed in them too. They walked with straighter backs, looked at the sky with quiet pride. They knew that somewhere up there, in the cold of space, something was watching over them. Not a hero, not a god, but something built by their own hands. Children learned about the Equinox in school. They didn't memorize dates or battle reports. They listened to stories about the day the sky changed, the day the galaxy stopped laughing. In a classroom in Ohio, a young girl raised her hand and asked her teacher, "Will the ship ever come back?" The teacher smiled gently and said, "Only if we ever need it again." Claire Wren returned to Earth and stood before the United Council. They asked her what came next, if there would be revenge, punishment, or conquest. She looked at them and said, "No, there will be peace, but this time, They will listen when we speak. Jack Halden retired from service. He moved to a small home near the mountains, quiet and far from the stars. People called him a hero, but he never smiled when they said it. He had seen what it took to win respect, and he would carry that memory until the end of his life. Alien empires were quiet now, for the first time in decades. They stopped building new warships, some even dismantled the ones they had. One by one, they sent new messages to Earth, not threats, but offers, not laughter, but respect. They didn't do this because they wanted peace. They did it because they feared silence. They feared the shape of that ship in the stars. They feared what came after laughter, and so the galaxy changed. Not with war, not with fire, not even with sound, but with one quiet ship that never blinked, never spoke, and never backed down. The Equinox became legend. Stories about it spread in every system. Some said it could appear anywhere in an instant. Others believed it was watching every planet at once, and many whispered that there were more ships like it, hidden in deep space, waiting for the moment they were needed. No one knew the truth, and no one dared to find out. One day, far in the future, a small alien scout ship drifted too close to the edge of human space. Its captain laughed as he said, "They were just one ship. What can they do now?" And then the stars above him darkened. The scout ship turned, and in front of it, there was nothing but a silent shape, smooth and black, glowing faint blue. No message came, no warning. Just one line flashed on their screen: "You've already heard." US once. The scout ship turned around and never came back. And so the Equinox remained, not as a weapon of war, but as a promise written in steel. That humans would never beg again, that silence would always answer when needed, and that the stars would never forget the day the sky roared.